Supporting the troops means caring beyond the uniform. We're going to get into it. Let's get it. Welcome. First of all, welcome. This is Unsolicited Perspectives. I'm your host, Bruce Anthony, here to lead the conversation in important events and topics that are shaping today's society. Join the conversation and follow us wherever you get your audio podcast. Subscribe to our YouTube channel for our video podcast, YouTube exclusive content, and our YouTube membership. Rate, review, like, comment, share. Share with your friends, share with your family, hell, even share with your enemies. On today's episode, I'll be interviewing Garret Biss. We're going to be talking about veterans and life after service. But that's enough of the intro. Let's get to the show. We hear a lot in this country about supporting the military and supporting the troops. And on paper, that sounds like a shared value, something everyone agrees on. But most of the time, that support gets translated into defense budgets, slogans, and symbolic gestures. What doesn't get enough attention is what happens after service, when people come home and have to figure out how to live a completely different life in a world that doesn't always know what to do with them. Because real support doesn't end with a uniform or deployment. It shows up in how we help people transition, how we talk about mental health, and whether we're willing to look at the parts of service that don't fit neatly into patriotic sound bites. That's what today's conversation is about. My guest is Garret Biss. He's a former Marine Corps pilot who spent years working with veterans around recovery, identity, and life after service. His work focuses less on labels and more on helping people reconnect with themselves, their sense of purpose, and what comes next. Today, we're talking about the transition out of the military, the quiet struggles that don't always get named, and what meaningful support actually looks like beyond the gratitude and beyond surface level solutions. This isn't about easy answers. It's about listening, understanding, and creating space for conversations we don't have often enough. And without further ado, here's my interview with Garret. As I said at the top, I'm here with Garret Biss. Biss is a veteran, somebody who was in the military, a Marine on top of that. Garret, when we get off air, I'll tell you the time that I accidentally took the wrong train station and ended up in Quantico. But we're here talking.
That's easy to do. A lot of people do that. You'd be surprised.
I was scared to death. But we're here to talk about you and your work. And this is a conversation I told you off air is so very, very important to me. People talk so much about supporting the troops and supporting the military. But when it comes to veteran support, that's where I feel this country is really lacking. And so this conversation is important because it's important for everybody to realize that when you say supporting the troops, it's not just the uniform, the deployments. It's about when they come home and they're no longer active and they're civilians, and recognizing that life is a little bit difficult for them. So we're going to talk about that, and I'm excited. So thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here, and I appreciate you for hosting conversations like this. You know, there's a lot of people that suffer with some darkness and hard and challenging times, and everyone has their own life experiences, their own journey that they're going through. So those challenges might look different. They might present differently. But I love bringing a conversation just back to the human elements. You know, there's only so many emotions that we feel as humans, and there's many common dark and positive emotions that we all feel. They just show up differently and at different times. But I love the opportunity to kind of bring this conversation back, not just to talk about the veterans. That's extremely important to me, and I always want to serve veterans. But I always try to share things in every conversation that people can apply to their own life, gain some insight that can be helpful in their own life. So I'm looking forward to digging into that as well.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, because too often in our society, we get in trauma comparison. And obviously, when it comes to veterans and people in the military and then civilians, like the trauma is different. But that doesn't mean that the trauma isn't still extremely traumatic to that particular individual, and the human element and compassion needs to be shared across the board.
Yeah.
So I love that you brought that up. But
because that's the thing, is that the worst thing that happened to somebody is the worst thing that happened to them. So when you have your whole kind of calibration for where you are in your life and the darkest thing, like the worst thing that's happened to you is the worst thing that's happened to you. So that kind of sets, for one, it has implications, emotionally and psychologically, that, for things that might linger. But it's also, your unique framework for the obstacles and challenges that you face. And if your hardest thing was different than my hardest thing, it doesn't mean that the challenges or the complications that come from that is going to be different. So I think, that's an important thing to remember, especially as we're interacting with others and as we're trauma comparing or experience comparing. Yeah, your situation might have been different, but that was your worst situation, and my worst situation is also affecting me in a certain way.
Yeah, absolutely right. Okay, I always love to start every interview with, let's go back. All right. When you think back to when you were the young Garret, before you got into uniform, before you were in the cockpit, before you got the rank, what parts of your upbringing or early life do you think shaped the man you eventually became?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I don't know. It'd be fun to get my mom on here for a little while to gain her insight on it. But I think, let's see, I think she would say that I was a little bit mischievous, a little bit of encouraged to test boundaries and see what I could get away with, which terrifies me because I have a 16-year-old daughter, but we recently had a 4-year-old boy and now a 4-month-old child. So for one, I think that boys and girls are of a different species. I mean, trying to deal with a 4-year-old running around the house is a lot different than what a girl was like. But I think that I'm going to get some retribution for my childhood behavior. I see some early indicators in my son, but I would, constantly testing boundaries and exploring. I mean, I'd go outside all the time, just want to be lost in the woods or creating things and playing with friends, or testing the boundaries of maybe how far away I could go from the house before it would cause some problems. There was one time when I'll have to ask my mom again. I think it was, 5, 6 years old or something. I rode my bike about 1.5 miles away from the house to go to an ice cream store. So she wasn't very pleased with me when I got home. But I think that's, maybe I tempered that a little bit to conform to adult expectations, but I still think there's an element of that lingers, this kind of curiosity on, what are the boundaries? What are, and generally, what does the world say we should or shouldn't do? We should or shouldn't have? What kind of outcomes should we expect? And today, anytime I hear the word should, either when I'm thinking it myself or when I hear somebody tell me that either you should have or you have to have, it triggers in me this like inquisitive nature, like, okay, where does that come from? Is that true? Is that valid? Before I conform to it, let me at least test it and experiment with it to see if that's something that I need to guide my life by.
It kind of sounds like, pushing boundaries, also pushing yourself. And do you think that led you to the military? What led you to decide to join the Marine Corps?
Yeah, it's a great question. So a couple different things, really, 3 or 4 different reasons I joined the Marines. One, I had no idea what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. So at 17, 18 years old, I figured, well, let me go serve for a couple of years in the Marine Corps and maybe I'll figure it out. I did have some inclinations to go to college, but I had no idea how I'd pay for it. So I thought, all right, there's a bonus. Maybe they'll give me some money to help pay for college. And also there was this interesting thing. I noticed that anytime I spoke with, this is when I was 13 up through high school, anytime I spoke with somebody that was a veteran, whether it was Vietnam or World War II, I realized as they're expressing their experience, something seemed to change about their affect, about their attitude. And I remember so often somebody would share stories about their time in uniform and recall them with such vivid detail that I realized I didn't really understand what it was about that experience that created such an imprint on that individual. But I realized the only way to really figure that out for myself was to put on the uniform and go find out. And then back to the testing boundaries piece, I also realized that I graduated high school a couple months early. I went through an adult education program and graduated a little early, and then thought maybe I had 6 or 8 months before I went to the Marines. But there were some behaviors and some things that were going on where I realized like maybe I should go ahead and accelerate that. So I called my recruiter. I was like, hey, can you get me down there in the next couple of weeks? I don't think I can last until August.
Where are you originally from?
From Wilmington, Delaware.
Not that far from me. Okay, I'm a little familiar with Wilmington, Delaware, and you don't need to get into detail. but
Yeah.
you said that you might have been getting into a little bit of trouble. That's the reason why you went into the military earlier.
hmm
Was it healthy, teenage, risky trouble, or was it something that you think, all right, I might not get to go to the military because I might be someplace else?
Yeah, great question. So, yeah, indicators of all of those things. So, normal, I guess, child behavior,
Mm-hmm.
not preferred child behavior, but normal experimenting with things. Really, just a bored and idle mind is a terrible thing to have. So, staying up all hours, doing whatever I could, trying to engage with whoever I could engage with. I think I only went before a judge one time, so I don't know that there was some early indicators there that maybe I might take a different path. But
Mm-hmm. So you go into the military, obviously that gives you structure. What was kind of your experience? And you don't need to go into detail because some of it might be, you can't talk about it. But what was your experience climbing up the ranks? So joining and then climbing up the ranks in the Marine Corps.
yeah, so I think one thing, and I think a lot of service members will echo this, that very quickly you notice how profound a sense of belonging and community you have in the military. And within a couple of months, that old version of who you were, once you go through that basic training or the boot camp, uh, you make a tremendous shift. And the only other people that can understand that shift of what you've gone through, some of the struggles, some of the strain, some of the exertion that you've put, some of the internal battles or internal obstacles that you've been pushed through as you grow into the service member that you've become, the only other individuals that understand that are people that have also been in the uniform. So it's a beautiful thing because it creates this very tight bond, this really tight sense of community, but it also separates you from the community that you've come from because now you are something different. You've been through different experiences. So that's something that, that really sticks with you, even while I was in the uniform or even now as a veteran. I mean, if I go into an environment and there's some other veteran or there was some other Marine in that environment, in a store, in a restaurant, like even if they're not in uniform, you just kind of get a feel, you get a sense, you know that's, hey, that's somebody that's part of my tribe. So it's a beautiful thing. And then with that closeness and with that support and with that brotherhood or sisterhood that develops, it's amazing what people can do, like what they're willing to do for one another, the kind of hardships that they're willing to lean into, the amount of sacrifice or suffering that they're willing to endure because they know it's in service of something greater than themselves. Of course, the country, of course, the military branch, but all the way down at the myopic level in service of those people that are to my left and my right. So it's beautiful to kind of always see that or always have opportunities where you're experiencing that, where people are kind of pushing beyond the bounds of their limits of exertion or tiredness or hunger, coming up with creative solutions, solving things together, and doing that in a way that's of service. So it's really neat to be a part of that tribe. And that also sets us up for, which I'm sure we'll get into, sets us up for the consequences or the cost that's paid when you ultimately leave that tribe and become a veteran.
I don't want to make it simplistic, but it seems like what you're describing is bonding through adversity that makes you family. So family bonding through adversity.
Right.
Only people that have gone through that specific boot camp training, the whole run, would have that type of bond, even if they weren't in it together. I know what you went through. Hey, we're family. That's kind of what I'm getting from what you're describing.
And then it's for all the comfort that you get and all the things that you can say to another person without having to say a word at all. Like all the things that they get about you and that you get about them creates a real sense of psychological safety that, I'm surrounded by my tribe. They get me. I know what they're going through. They know what I'm going through. They can look out for me and I can look out for them as well. It's a beautiful thing. And that's one of the reasons that our military forces are as lethal and as effective as they are, because of all that's done through initial basic training and then through training evolutions throughout service to really reinforce that and build that bond.
So after retiring from the Marines, there was clearly a moment where things shifted for you eternally. And we'll get into the details of that now, later, whenever you're ready.
When we do.
Yeah. What was that period, and when did you realize something deeper needed to change? So you're retiring. You're out of your tribe, and now you're back into the society that you were in before you joined that tribe.
Right.
What was that shift like for you internally, inside?
There's a lot of shock there, and a lot of experiences that were really unexpected. But even months and a year or two leading up to that retirement, there was a lot of concern and kind of contemplation about who will I be and how will I perform? How do I stack up in the civilian world? I've been in the Marines. I'd been in the Marines for 16, 17 years at that point. And I knew how to be a Marine. I knew what was expected of me. I knew how to perform to the standards that were expected. I knew how to get promoted. I got, accolades or awards for certain things. So I knew that at least over time, I learned how to function well and be a good and valuable Marine.
Right.
But I always question, does any of this translate beyond these walls? Does any of this translate in the real world? So there was a bit of insecurity even before making that transition of, what of this is transferable? What of this maps to the things that I'll experience outside of here? And what will that journey be like? And then when you transition out of the military, it was also something that was very unexpected. I didn't realize that the loss of that bond and that connection was going to be so abrupt and so profound. At that point in my career, I was living out in town. So I was living in the city near the base that I was stationed. So I was already living in the community. I was shopping in the community. I was going to dinner in the community. I had friends that weren't in the military, so I had connections in the community. So I didn't realize how awkward it was going to be when I was no longer part of the service member community, because I was still surrounded by the same people doing the same things, but something about it felt different. And it took me a little while to realize what that was, but it was that loss of sense of belonging. Now, even though I was in my home community or even in the town that I lived in some ways I felt like I was in a foreign land, in a foreign place. Now I had this different identity and I was still really trying to figure out what this new identity was. So my place in the world and my place in the community wasn't firmly established, and that created a lot of kind of internal struggle.
It's funny that you bring up the word internal, because as I was watching your TED Talk, you talk about the internal void, which is what you just described, that internal void within inside of you that you're like, what am I now? I used to be this. I was this for so long. I'm not that anymore. I can't be that anymore. I had to become something different, but I don't know what.
Yeah.
So
and then, and when you go through a transition like that and you lose a major foundation. So that's what I really wanted to share in the TEDx talk, was this understanding from that human experience perspective, what happens when you transition out of the military. And what I came to really understand and appreciate is that we have fundamental needs for connection. Part of that need for connection is a need for authenticity, to be able to establish and maintain connections and yet show up as we are, as our true self, not being forced to wear masks and show up as a version of ourselves, trying to be accepted. And we have a real strong sense for meaning, or a need for meaning. When that connection is disrupted, or any of these basic human needs are not fulfilled, this really puts us or drives us into a survival state. We talk a lot about the fight or flight state. One of the things that happens when you make that shift, or if you're stuck in this heightened state, is that all of your attention, all of your energy goes to survival. I mean, instead of being able to see things more broadly and maintain a proper perspective about things, all of your attention is focused on what's the next potential threat that's going to come up, what's something that might take me out, what's something that I need to avoid, how do I need to maneuver so that I can operate in this place and not be threatened. And when that happens, really, one way to think about it is, if you ever used a camera with a little zoom lens on it that you have to twist, when you twist that zoom lens, it really, it zooms in on, and a lot of the field of vision that you had now disappears because you're trying to focus on one thing in the center of the aperture. And that's really a way that I understand our perspective and our attention as we're in that stress state. So now I'm not able to see everything for what it is, good and bad, in the same frame. All I can see of those, is where I'm trying to focus for specific threats. So this is something I think gets a lot of people stuck. And if you're not aware of this and you're not encouraged or shown how to work on this, and you get stuck in that zoomed in state, then your whole world just becomes defined by these negative things that you're trying to, address, or that you're trying to battle. And that's a lot what I experienced when I transitioned out. I lost that sense of belonging, that sense of meaning. It created a tremendous void inside of me. And then I was stuck in this fight or flight state and this really high, this heightened state of alert. So instead of being able to see everything that was true about me, I tended to just see the things that I didn't like about me, or the fears or the worries or the potential, threats, whether it was financial, relationships, health related threats. And that's what defined my whole perspective. So that seemed like it was the entirety of the world that I was living in. So a lot of the work that I do now with veterans or anybody that's in recovery is helping them come out of that heightened state, come out of that high stress state and begin to expand that aperture so they can remember. This is not saying that, this is not saying that you don't have defects, that you don't have weaknesses, that you haven't made some mistakes in the past. This is saying that it's also true that there's many beautiful things about you. You've had many wins, many successes, you've developed many strengths, and it's fair to you and it's necessary for your recovery journey or your growth or healing journey to be able to see all of that and to be aware of all of that.
It seems like what you're describing to me, that tunnel vision, that horse with blinders on, that
Right.
even if you have people that are close to you, because you're hyper focused on your flaws, you feel absolutely alone. And that's even compounded by the fact that you used to be a part of this tribe that you were around all the time that you're not around anymore. Am
Right.
I getting that right? Is that kind of how you felt? Like, I'm alone, no matter who's around me right now.
Right. Yeah, certainly. I
My
mean, just imagine, if you're, let's say you're going on a trip and they have to do an emergency landing in a foreign country, and maybe you're there with a couple friends of yours, but you were joking and laughing and everybody was having a great time and feeling a sense of inner peace. But now you land in this foreign zone and you don't know anything around you. You don't know what's a threat. You don't know who you can trust, if you can trust anything at all. You don't know what might take you out. You need to get your basic needs met. So now all the sense of peace and connection and everything that came from those that were around you, now it's okay. I'm just, I'm just looking for threats. I'm just trying to survive right now. So even though those things might still be around you, you might have the same clothes on that you were grateful for, 2 hours prior. You might have, all the things going on at home that you were grateful for, and might be very aware of different strengths that you have and things that are going well in your life. But now you're in survival mode. You're in some foreign place with all these foreign things around you. And you become hyper focused on, I just need to survive this moment. So what's the next potential threat that could take me out? What's the next gap that I need to be aware of so it doesn't become a threat?
And that's your training. That's what they teach you in the military, because every decision or majority of decisions are life and death. You have to think in that regard. So when you're in the normal life and these aren't life or death decisions, you're still placing that thought process on every single decision. And you talk about the internal void, and you're going through a tough transition and you start drinking more than usual. How big of a problem did your drinking become?
So I think, it was a normal behavior that turned into a maladaptive coping. I mean, I for many years, I didn't have a healthy relationship with alcohol, but I really saw it. Thank goodness I had a moment of awareness where I realized that, oh, this is alleviating too much pain. Like there's something in here that this is doing. And I don't think it's good in this nature. It's not something that's adding a little bit of joy or relieving a little bit of stress. There's this deep void. There's this tremendous pain and this source of fear inside of me. And numbing that out might not be the best thing right now. Like if you have a broken leg, of course, morphine will help you not feel the pain, but it doesn't mean just take the morphine and everything's okay.
Right.
I started to understand and appreciate that my relationship, whether it was alcohol or whether it was, spending money or traveling or trying to escape the moment by going and enjoying something, I realized that the potential damage and the harm that could cause was a lot greater than the potential joy that could come from it. So thank goodness I recognized that, and I wanted to test myself. And I said, all right, is this a problem or is it not a problem? Well, if I can give it up for 10 days, then that's at least an indicator that maybe it's not too severe of a problem. So let me start here. And then I ended up, taking some 40-day breaks just to test myself, not just with alcohol, but with other things, whether it was, I don't remember if Netflix was as big a thing, but whether it was, binging TV or eating sweets or anything else that I fortunately recognized had some kind of numbing or some kind of escape effect to it. So I would start to test myself, and and thank goodness I did, because I think it slowed the downward spiral. Of course, it didn't alleviate the challenges. Once you remove that numbing mechanism, well, then you have to do some work to try to get back to a solid ground or to a better place. But fortunately for me, I was encouraged to test myself and try that out, see what would happen.
In your TEDx talk, you gave a stat that I was floored by. You said that 22 veterans a day commit suicide.
Yeah, that's been the average since I believe since the 9/11, or since the GWAT kind of generation of veterans. So we've lost, I hate to mess up the stat, I think it's 5 or 6 times the number of people that have been lost in combat we've lost to suicide or to preventable death. And the common number that's been reported for years is 22 a day on average. But what they've recently found is that sometimes that number is as high as 40 or 44 a day, especially when you start to include unnecessary or preventable deaths due to accidental overdose or activities, high risk behaviors that resulted in somebody's death, where maybe they weren't intentionally going out trying to take their own life, but they were doing something to numb that pain or to try to survive that moment. And it was numbing that pain was the greater priority in their life than doing something safe. So we see this all the time with people that get into high speed accidents, or they're, out riding their motorcycle at 120 miles an hour. These are all activities to try to deal with or to escape from some battle that they're faced on the inside. And maybe they weren't trying to take their own life, but they certainly weren't trying not to. And I think these are all indicators of very unfortunate, very sad preventable deaths that our veteran community shouldn't be bearing.
And you got to a point where you started having suicidal thoughts. In your TEDx, you told a story of hanging out with your buddy. Y'all were having a good time, and you asked him, "Hey, man, that gun at the top of the closet, can you go ahead and take that with the bullets?" Can you explain to me or explain to the audience what it was that you were feeling in that time? You've talked about that internal void, but in that moment, what was it that you were feeling, and the awareness that you had to be like, you know what? No, buddy, I need you to take this away from me now.
Yeah. The big shift for me was, I don't want to make it sound like this is normal. I don't think it's healthy, but I do think it is normal for individuals to have thoughts of, oh, I wonder if I would ever do that, or I wonder how I would do that if I were to cross that line. So I would have those thoughts from time to time. And then what really kind of shook me awake, if you will, was one day I realized that, those thoughts, they're becoming more regular, and they don't have that kind of emotional, like, knee-jerk response when I feel that. It's not like something I entertain for a second and then immediately push it out of my mind. It started to feel so normal. And when I'd think about it or think about how I might do it or where or when I might do it, when it started to feel as normal as, like, hey, I got to remember to get milk when I go to the grocery store, and have that same kind of, lack of emotional resonance or emotional response inside, I was like, oh no, I don't know what it looks like to be 1 day or 1 hour before doing that act, but I know that 22 veterans a day are doing it. And I don't know if I'm 1 day, 1 week, 1 month away from crossing that line, and not being able to say with certainty that I wouldn't do it was enough to kind of scare me and help me realize that I needed to do something different. So I didn't have I guess I didn't have the courage or the wherewithal to do everything to protect myself. But I saw an opportunity when a buddy came and we were, talking about firearms. And before he left, I was casually and, not trying to excite any kind of reaction. I was just like, hey, would you mind, where it is, would you mind going and taking it with you when you go? And that's all that I said. And this was, this wasn't a veteran, but fortunately it was somebody who I had a great relationship with. And he was the kind of guy where you don't need to explain anything. He's not going to ask any questions. He's just going to do it.
Yeah. We're going to get into your recovery, but I want to talk about mentally what point it had to get to for you to seek help, because you talk about mentorship and because you're really big on mentorship. But what was the moment that you were like, okay, I need help? Being a Marine, first of all, which is different than everybody else, Marine, Navy, Army, Air Force, Marines are different. Okay. Being a Marine, and then also being a male, because most males have a difficult time even asking for help. You
Right.
have those two things
Mhm.
compounding each other. At what point did you get to mentally, emotionally, and say to yourself, no, 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 I need help now?
Right. So yeah, great question. So one thing, kind of to preface all of this, I do think that there's this interesting relationship that I've become aware of especially in the military context. So there's an unfair relationship, I think, that we have between suffering and self-worth. So one of the things that we do, or one of the reasons that we develop this sense of self-worth and value as a service member, is because of some of that suffering that we've endured in our training and some of the hardships that we've had to go through. And I think even as a society, those service members that we seem to respect or revere the most, like our special operators, the SEALs, the Delta, the Rangers, one of the things that we revere or respect about them so much is that we know that the training that they've had to go through is something that so few people can manage and successfully navigate. So there's this relationship there between, wow, this person can go so many days without sleep and so many days without food and work in the most austere and uncomfortable environments, yet they can still perform as the elite operator that they are. But I think, so it's certainly at the extreme at the special operators, but I think that's also a trend that kind of carries through. One of the things that we were very proud of in the Marine Corps was doing things that were uncomfortable intentionally. They said if it wasn't raining, you weren't really training. So it's like, if it's not cold and uncomfortable, then you're not really getting the maximum value or benefit out of it. And then a lot of our sense of worth and the value that we have as an individual or as a service member comes from linking back on all those hardships that we had to endure. Well, the challenge or the negative consequence of this is if you can create a relationship in your mind that there's some connection between your ability to suffer and the value that you have as an individual, then the negative consequence or the cost of this is when you do begin to suffer, you also think, is this somehow representative of the value that I have as an individual? Do I need to just suck it up and push on and try to put a couple more things in my pack and try to push through this? Or do I have to admit to myself or to somebody else that I'm not as valuable as I thought I was? So this in and of itself can be a major barrier to individuals for seeking that treatment or for accepting unnecessary and enduring suffering before they're willing to reach out. So I recognize this. It took me a long time to kind of look back and recognize maybe this was something that was an internal driver to not reaching out. I also recognized an unhealthy relationship that I had with drinking, with some other behaviors or substances, but I was really avoidant to seeking treatment for that specifically. The way that I felt and, at the time, the way that I understood it was, there were things that I was inviting into my life and there were substances that I was using because the pain or whatever it was I was trying to mask or cover it up was too great for me to fight it myself. So in some way, at least at that time, from that perspective, the thought of letting go of something that was a necessary weapon I was using in this battle against this darkness inside of me, it didn't make sense to me that was the long-term solution to the problem that I was having. Of course, that, removing and I work with a lot of people in recovery now, and I always think that, sobriety or removing a drug of choice is a fantastic first step and a very important thing to accelerate the journey. But I also recognize that beneath that, there's something that needed to be worked on. There's something that needed to be healed. There was some void inside of me that needed to be filled. So I don't know how I was open to it, just other than being at the right place in the right time and hearing the right thing. Sometimes you'll hear something mentioned in a couple different conversations or in a couple of different ways, and you think, all right, is this a message for me from somewhere beyond? Is God or is our Creator trying to share something with me? So kind of with that curiosity, I leaned into and I started investigating something. I was turned on to the work of a gentleman who became my mentor and a coach for a period of time. And fortunately, I leaned into it. I said, I don't know how to solve these problems. I don't know how to heal this pain, but I'm gonna at least escape into something. So maybe an unhealthy behavior in some regards when we escape the problems that are present in our life and focus our attention somewhere. But in this specific instance, it really served me. I said, all right, there's all this personal development stuff. There's this positive psychology stuff. I'm sure that somebody out there has an answer to the problems that I'm going through. And as was evident in the number of veterans that we lost every day, I knew that I wasn't the only one. So I was only hoping that there was some solution out there. So I really leaned into this journey of self-discovery and working with my mentor. And through that process, what he helped me do was he helped me fill that void. So all of these cravings that I had and all this desire I had to escape what I realized was after a period of time, those cravings started to diminish. That void didn't seem as present. Something seemed to be changing or shifting inside of me. And it was through the awareness that I gained, through that personal experience, and then the awareness that I gained kind of looking back on it, like, okay, what was that journey all about? How did that help me? And what was I introduced into that could be of use to somebody else going through a similar challenge? And a lot of this was based on the field of positive psychology and what I've come to understand, or a way I like to describe traditional psychology, which is what we think of as the clinical care or treatment. And the difference between traditional psychology and positive psychology, I think, is greatly explained in a metaphor. So imagine a hot air balloon as representative of somebody's potential or how well they're doing in their life. So if that hot air balloon is stuck at a certain altitude, there's a couple things that are affecting the elevation of that hot air balloon. There's the weights, there's the sandbags, there's whatever is holding that thing down. And then there's also the amount of hot air that's in the hot air balloon. What's the upward lift that's pulling this thing up? So when I understand of traditional psychology is that it's really a focus on what are the symptoms, what are the diagnoses, the diseases, what is it, what are these negative things that are holding somebody down, that are creating that extra friction or that extra load in their life, and how do we start to mitigate some of those symptoms or treat some of those things that are holding somebody back? What I was introduced to in really the non-clinical space, and this is what coaching psychology is really based on, is what are the things that are going well? What are the strengths that somebody has? What is the things that are already creating that upward lift? And how do we leverage that to get to a better place? So they can both, they can complement each other extremely well. And that's a lot of the work that I do, is trying to find ways to complement what somebody might be going through or introduced to in a treatment setting or in a clinical setting. But there's a lot more that can be done. I think, there's an unlimited upside that you can experience or achieve. So a lot of the coaching that I went through was on processes and on things that helped me first. And tying back to the TED Talk, I talk about these 3 fundamental needs for connection, for authenticity, for meaning. First, it helped me regain that sense of connection, which that connection doesn't start with connection to a new tribe or regaining a sense of belonging. The most important connection that we can have is a connection that we have with ourselves. So it's the connection with the positive traits that we have. It's the connection with the strengths that we have. It's recognizing the wins and the successes that we've had in our life so that we can begin to see ourselves in a more positive image. Once we begin to regain a sense of self-respect or self-worth, then we can lean into fostering healthy connections with others. Because if we feel terrible about ourselves, if that aperture is shrunk in on all the things that we hate or all the weaknesses or all the defects that we've identified in ourselves, if you go out and try to foster new connections from that regard, then you're doing it in a very unhealthy way. You're doing it for acceptance. You're doing it because your sense of self-worth is founded on how other people perceive you. So if you can imagine going out in the world, just showing up as a version of yourself, being that chameleon, trying to show up in every environment or every engagement to win somebody else's acceptance or approval, that's a very dynamic, very stressful, and very unhealthy place to be. So before we can begin to foster healthy and connections and rebuild that sense of emotional and psychological foundation for our well-being, we need to first connect with ourselves. And that's a lot of the work that he started to introduce me to. So there's some exercises I use now that are really, fundamental to the coaching that I do. One of the first exercises I'll have somebody do is sit down and write a list of 100 wins and successes that you've had in your life. And if you're in a really dark place, it might be hard to come up with 1 or 2. The biggest litmus test for me is to ask somebody, okay, how easy would it be for you to list all your defects, all your mistakes, all the losses, all of the things that you're embarrassed about? And for most people, when they're really stuck in that dark place, they're like, oh man, I'm going to need more than 1 sheet of paper. Like, give me a notebook. I'm going to fill this thing up. Well, that's a litmus test to me, confirming where they are in their journey and where they are in their mindset and where they are in their perspective. So shattering that and just kind of shattering that negative foundation and just starting to create a little momentum in the right direction can be profoundly impacted by doing something as simple as writing a list of wins and successes that you've had in your life. This forces you to begin to expand that aperture, not just looking at the things that about yourself that you hate, but also recognizing and giving credit to some of the many, beautiful things about you and the wins and successes that you've had as well.
This seems like this form of psychology was perfect for you given where you were. You talked about earlier that zoom in, focusing on your negative stuff. And this, you described it as escaping into something a little bit more healthier, I would say refocusing that those blinders to not look at your negatives, but to focus on your positives.
Right.
And I would imagine that this form of coaching is tailor-made for veterans who were feeling exactly like you were.
Yes, a lot of the work I do now specifically with veterans, but I've used this work in the recovery community and in many other communities. And I see it's very similar to anybody that's stuck in their life. Back to that human experience, anybody who feels stuck, anybody who's been through a major transition, anybody who feels like, hey, something's missing, something's not in alignment, all these cylinders aren't firing right. A lot of help can be had through these kind of processes. The mentor that I've worked with the most, he wasn't a veteran either. So, he works, he's known as America's #1 success coach. He works with a lot of people, and these same principles are just as efficacious for anybody else. I like working with veterans because that's the experience that I know the best. I understand some of the challenges. I understand the repercussions from military service and from that transition. And I know how it can get a lot of veterans stuck. So that's where I really focus my effort the most.
Some people still believe in that traditional type of recovery and psychology. Do you face any type of skepticism or pushback for talking about or taking a different path, especially in your veteran spaces?
Yeah, certainly. So I am not for or against any pathway to recovery. So I understand there's about 28 to 30 million adults in America that struggle with some substance or behavior. I also understand that that's 28 to 30 million different life paths. That's 28 to 30 million different combinations of experiences, of environments, of setbacks, of traumas that led that person to a place where the best that they can do to survive emotionally in the moment is a reliance on some substance or behavior. So with that in mind, I also understand there's not one pathway to recovery. There's not 10 pathways to recovery. There's not thousands of pathways to recovery. There might be as many as 28 to 30 million different pathways to recovery because everybody took a different journey into that darkness. Everybody's going to need a different combination of tools and resources and treatments and support to get back to or to get to that place that they want to be. So I'm a huge advocate for every form of recovery that's out there, so long as it's providing value to that individual. And that's what I always encourage. I work with a lot of civilians now that are in recovery, and I always encourage somebody, just try something, take what's valuable to you, take the benefit, the gain that you can get from it. And if you feel like it's not helping you as much as you would like, or maybe there's something missing or out of alignment with your values and beliefs, then you have to do some serious introspection and ask yourself, is it me that's creating this friction? Am I just not willing to commit and kind of lean into this process? Or is there something about this particular framework or this particular model that's not really addressing my needs? If it's not an internal friction that you're creating, then by all means, go find anything else that you can add to your repertoire of tools and resources and support to make that difference. So I work with people that go through many different kinds of treatments and recovery modalities. And my aim is never to replace what somebody else is doing that's effective. It's to help fill some gaps or help accelerate their progress, help them be exposed or experience some things that can help accelerate that journey.
I love that answer. Absolutely love it. With veterans today entering civilian life, and you've talked a lot about it during this discussion, but I still feel like there's a lot that civilians have misunderstood about the struggles for veterans. What do you think tends to be oversimplified, and what do you think tends to be ignored?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think a lot of individuals, they have, there's some stereotypes and there's some biases and there's people, anytime we don't know something fully, we make some assumptions to kind of fill in the gaps of what we don't know. And for a lot of individuals that aren't closely connected with military families or service members, they might fill in some of those gaps with just what they see in the movies or hear on TV or hear their friends talking about. So many times what I've seen is they'll come to some unfair or unrealistic assumptions about what that veteran journey or what that veteran experience might look like. For a lot of individuals, and this is a lot of mental health professionals also, I do a lot of speaking, a lot of training with mental health professionals on that cultural awareness piece to help them understand the veteran experience. And I think that there's this unfair assumption that if veteran is experiencing PTSD or substance use disorder, then it must connect back to some trauma that they experienced on the battlefield, or maybe some military sexual trauma while they were in the service. And while sadly that's true for a lot of veterans, it's not true for most. Yet most veterans will experience some of these symptoms or some of these effects of post-trauma, if for no other reason than because of that transition from military service.
So how do we make people more aware of their biases when they don't know? And people are always experts on things that they don't know. It seems like that's
right.
becoming more and more of an epidemic nowadays. How do we kind of wake those people up to say, hey, it's not this, or it's not that simple?
Right. Well, they're going to, people are going to fill in the blanks with whatever they have access to or whatever they've heard. So I think having more conversations like this and shining a different light on, first, helping veterans better understand it. That, the two reasons I did that TEDx talk, which is called The Unspoken Trauma That All Veterans Face, is one, I wanted veterans to understand when they find themselves in that darkness. I wanted to give them some perspective on what shifts have happened in their life to help them understand and contextualize the challenges that they're going through. One of the hardest things that we can face as a human is to be in pain or experience suffering and have no idea where it came from. If you just wake up one day and everything hurts, but you have no idea where it came from, it can be very hard to have hope or an understanding that things can get better. And it can make you feel stuck, and then maybe make it feel like it's all your fault, or you're just so defective or damaged that there's no hope out there. So that's the biggest message I want for veterans, whether it helps them the day they get out of uniform or whether they remember that quick message years later. I wanted them to have some context for what they might be going through internally, so they can also have some context and some hope that things can get better. And I really wanted the civilian population or non-veterans to understand, this is also what's happening through that veteran transition experience. These are some of the internal battles that they might be facing and some of the struggles. So I think the way that we do that is by having more conversations about it, so that people have different data and different evidence to fill in some of those assumptions. So, offering those unsolicited perspectives so that people can add some things to their repertoire and paint that clearer picture is a great way to do it.
I guess you're never out of recovery, right? Like you're always kind of in recovery. But when you got to the point where your mentor and your recovery had helped you so much, you decided to start working with other people. That's what you're doing now. So tell me about what you created. You created a whole system and a whole organization to help people.
Yeah. So the work I'm doing now is trying to recreate and trying to offer some of the things that I found most helpful in my life and in my recovery journey, and doing it through a lens of my experience as a veteran. So I see, there's a couple challenges that veterans face, especially when they get into treatment, or for those veterans that get involved in the justice system and have some other consequences that they're facing. One of the challenges I see is that they're often pushed into or introduced to programs that weren't really designed with the veteran experience in mind. So I understand that a lot of individuals that have struggled with a substance or behavior or severe mental health challenge, sadly and unfortunately, many times that is because of the life experience that they've had, and not being afforded the opportunity and the experiences and the support and the nurturing in order to develop the mental and emotional wellness that they need to deal with life on life's terms. So this creates a weak foundation where sometimes substances and behaviors can come in and fill a void or lead to some problematic challenges. I understand the veteran experience as somebody who has had an experience of tremendous self-worth, of value, of meaning, of connection, of that strong bond and sense of belonging, and then went through a shift or a transition where they lost it all. So I feel that most individuals, these two different populations, whether it's a civilian that's struggling with mental health or substances, or a veteran's, their journey into that place often looks a lot different. So their journey out of that place might also look a lot different. So we see some real challenges with getting veterans into treatment or into programs or into support. And then we see major challenges in keeping them engaged. I've talked to a lot of veterans as coaching clients, and they say, the stuff that I'm getting in these treatments or in these groups, it just doesn't resonate with me. It doesn't match to what my experience has been. So it doesn't really feel like it's that helpful. So a lot of what I'm doing now is trying to fill those gaps and align the services and things that are out there so they can better connect with the veteran experience. I was recently down in Georgia working with some veteran inmates, and one of the things the veteran said after going through, some of the programming or classes I provided was, now I better understand how I got here, and I'm ready to start sharing more. I'm ready to engage more with with my family and with my clinicians and treatment providers, because I have a clearer understanding of where I am. So helping just provide that context, doing it in a non-clinical way, doing it through recovery coaching, doing it through classes and through training is a very powerful way to get better outcomes from those veterans that are in, certain kinds of programs so they can get to a better place. And I think a lot of it comes back to that analogy about the hot air balloon, about the positive psychology. Like if you want somebody to get better, you can't just remove everything from them that is bad. Of course that can help the progress or help the journey going forward, but if there's not enough emphasis on leveraging and strengthening everything that's good in an individual, then there's only so far that they can go in their recovery journey.
This, once again, I don't mean to simplify things, but this might be a simplified way of saying that what you're doing is creating a new mission, but this is a healthier mission. This is something that veterans are trained to do. Right. Go on a mission, accomplish that mission. It seems like when you're doing these clinicians, that what you're doing is giving these veterans a new mission, that focus, that tunnel focus on this is the mission. This is how we get better. And in that kind of, oh, okay, this is recognizable to me.
Right.
I can do this. Is that kind of?
Yeah, I think there's a lot in there and so many different things to unpack. So yes, giving veterans a new mission, but first and foremost, through that reconnection piece, helping them realize and appreciate that they deserve to feel better. If we've been in a dark place long enough and we've been messing up our own lives through substances, through behaviors, through some challenges, wreaking havoc in our relationships, you very quickly get to a place where you feel like you don't deserve to have anything feel better. And this is a major thing that trips a lot of people up in their recovery journey. When they start to make that progress and their life starts to settle down and it's not as chaotic as it used to be, if that self-doubt and that lack of self-worth starts to creep in, then a lot of people think, maybe I don't deserve this. Maybe I need to go back to my old ways because of the pain and the suffering that I feel there. Like that was a sentence that I deserve. And that's what I deserve to experience in my life. So by simply helping veterans reconnect with themselves, provide them the context. What is it that led me into this darkness? And then reminding them, let's turn on that light. Let's turn on that flashlight and remind you of all the beautiful things and the strong things and the things that are worthwhile in you so that you can invest more in your mission to get to a better place. So there's a lot there. And then back to the mission aspect of it, this really ties back to that fundamental need that we have for meaning. So I used to understand meaning as just something that was a nice to have. It provided some context. It was pretty cool if you had it. Didn't necessarily, cost anything if you didn't have a strong sense of meaning. But what I've come to understand is that meaning is actually a very profound need that we have for our emotional and mental well-being. It's meaning that provides our capacity to endure suffering. It's meaning that allows us to go through difficult times and really lean into challenges and do things that can help promote that growth or help us get to a better place. So without that sense of meaning or without that mission of getting better, you might have a mission. If you don't feel that you deserve the goal or the end state of that mission, then you're not going to lean in, you're not going to invest in it with everything that you can. But having that mission also provides context for why am I doing these difficult things? Like, what is the reason for doing this? And back to the, the human experience, we all go through this. If you've ever set a goal and didn't have a reason for that goal, it's next to impossible to accomplish it. If you just say, hey, I'm going to save $10,000, I'm going to lose 10 pounds. If you don't have a meaning associated with that, then most likely you're not going to achieve that goal. But the minute you say, I need to save $10,000 for for my wedding, or I need to save $5,000 to take my family on a vacation, I need to lose 10 pounds because it's going to be a beach vacation. I need to look good when I get there. Once you have that sense of meaning wrapped around this goal that you've set, now you have the capacity to do the difficult things day in and day out so that you can reach that goal. Also, the sense of meaning is something that helps transmute the pain and the adversity and the suffering from the past and get something good out of it. The struggles that we've been through, they cause pain and they cause discomfort in the moment. But within every struggle that we've been through, there's also seeds for something beautiful and something great to come out on the other side. I used to get asked a lot, why do you work with people that are in recovery? If you're a wellness coach or a mindset coach, there's a lot of people that you can work with. Why would you choose to niche down and work with people in recovery. And my response is always, I think life, the human experience, the human journey can be a lot like a pendulum. And the further that pendulum swings into one direction of pain and despair and adversity and suffering and trauma, the greater the potential it has to swing in the other direction of compassion and determination and self-worth. So there's something beautiful that can happen when you work with people that are coming from the darkest places. The heights that they can get to are much greater and much different than somebody else that hasn't gone through some of that struggle. But that process of swinging that pendulum is aligning what you're doing, what goals you're setting, what mission you have, and helping you map this adversity or this pain or this trauma from the past to what I'm now going to accomplish. And there can be many different ways that we can do that. We can do it specifically. So there could be a specific trauma that we lived through, and now we want to dedicate ourselves to helping other people that have lived through that, whether you grew up in poverty or had, some trauma in your childhood. There's a lot of people that start organizations or start causes because they want to take their pain and suffering and invest it in something that can be a positive benefit. Or sometimes people map that pain or that adversity a little bit more generally, and they say, I've been through some major struggles. I've been through some severe hardships. I want to invest the strength and the wisdom and the determination that I gained going through and living through that experience, but I want to invest it in something else. I want to invest it in a profession, in a career. Maybe I want to start a business. Maybe I want to use that energy. I want to transmute that negative energy to allow me to create something good. But without that mission, without that sense of meaning that you can derive from that mission, then that's a tremendous path of healing that I think is really lost. And that's where I think real healing occurs. It's not in lessening or unburdening yourself of pain from the past. It's in investing that pain into something that provides a positive gain in the future.
Mm-hmm. Just like you doing what you do now gives you meaning.
Right.
And so you've reinvested the pain into the future. I love that.
Yeah. I'm going to make it worth something. Like there's going to be some reason I went through that. I'm not just going to let it be some trivial thing that happened that now I ignore. I'm going to, get all the juice I can from that pain and that suffering.
When someone listens to your talk or hears your story, listening, watching on this show, what do you hope unlocks for them? Especially for veterans who might still be sitting quietly in that darkness.
Yeah. So just know that, that as a veteran, regardless of what you experienced in the military, that transition from military service can and is often traumatic in and of itself. Through that major transition, you lose the way that you came to meet a lot of your basic fundamental needs. And there's going to be some really severe challenges that come out as a result of that. If you're really in the darkness and if you're really struggling, then I want you to know first and foremost that you are deserving of love, of happiness, of joy, of all the good things in your life that you want. You're deserving of it. And you can achieve it and you can accomplish those things as well if you're willing to accept some guidance, some coaching, open your mind. That doesn't have to be working with somebody. It could be leaning into some books or some podcasts, trying to gain some new ideas, anything that can help you broaden that perspective and help you remember some of the good things that are within you and start to fill some of those assumptions or fill some of those things that might be keeping you stuck and in your place. I do remember one time when I was on deployment where there was a unique kind of inflection point in my career where I just gotten a major upgrade. So all of the extra time that I had where I was studying and poring over, preparing for this major test for this upgrade, I really found myself with a lot of idle time. And in that idle time, I realized, I'm pouring every bit of energy into trying to do and achieve these things that I thought I was supposed to want. I've got the house, I've got the 2 cars, we're taking nice vacations, I got the wife and kid at home, I've got this great career, I'm traveling around. Why does it feel like my return on investment is so small? If I'm giving 100% of what I've got, then why do I feel like I'm getting, 10% joy and 10% fulfillment from this, from all this effort? And I realized one of 2 things was happening. Either life is supposed to be this cruel experience that we suffer through and then ultimately die at the end, or maybe there were some fundamental values and beliefs and perspectives that I had that were just not correct. So hoping it was that, hoping it wasn't, the first option, it opened my mind and my curiosity to go and try to learn some new things, see some different perspectives. And I spent the next couple of months, listening to sermons or worship services from many different denominations. I started watching TED Talks, and I think they were doing a thing at the time called Google Talks. Started reading different books. and looking for some kind of clarity or some kind of answers. That process took a period of time, but very quickly I began to see, oh, there's something here that's a little different than the way that I see or experience things. There's a perspective here that's a little bit different. And for anybody that's interested and wants to know a little bit more about this, I wrote a book a while ago called The Spheres Approach to Happiness and Fulfillment. And this really, shares some of those early ahas or awarenesses or change of perspective that I began to experience, which really altered the way that I saw the world, understood myself, understood my role in this life experience.
Wow. Garret, this has truly been, you've got an incredible story. And what you're doing now is so very, very important. I said at the top, the care that we need to give to veterans is not being given. And I'm glad to hear people like you, organizations like you, are refocusing to say, look, we need to care for our tribe. Because even though I'm not a part of that tribe, I feel that we all need to care for that tribe. So I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today, sharing your story, giving us wisdom of what's going on, the information that we need, what's going on, and the ability to start having conversations, civilians, to help veterans as well. So I just appreciate you coming on the show and having this conversation with me.
I really appreciate the opportunity. I thank you so much for not just this conversation, but many of the conversations that you're having, just trying to bring some new perspective and some new insight to help individuals in their own journey.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Before we close this out, I want to leave you with this. What really stayed with me in this conversation, how easy it is for someone to look fine on the outside while carrying a lot internally. How much of what we talk about today happens quietly, without announcements, without obvious signals, without people knowing what to ask or how to help. One of the most powerful takeaways here is that healing isn't just about removing what's hurting. It's about remembering what's still there. Strength, capability, value, the parts of yourself that doesn't disappear just because your life changed. Garret lives in a space helping people reconnect with who they are and figure out what comes next on their own terms. If today's conversation gave you something to think about or made you see the topic differently, I encourage you to take a little time to explore his work further. His book and his organization are both linked in the description of this episode for both the audio and video versions of this show. Whether that's for you or for someone that you care about, those resources are there for you. Garret, can't stress enough how much I really appreciate you sharing your time, your perspective, and your honesty with us today. And how important this conversation was, not just for veterans, but for civilians as well. I care deeply about this issue. And I want more of the public to talk about issues that are important like this than the trivial stuff that we fight and bicker about. There are people that are out there fighting for our freedoms that are dying when they come home. Not dying when they're fighting for our freedoms. They're dying when they come home. We all have a hand on helping them transition better and live a happy, healthy life when they enter the civilian life. That's the whole purpose of this entire conversation. We need to wake up. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for listening. I want to thank you for watching. And until next time, as always, I'll holla. Woo! That was a hell of a show. Thank you for rocking with us here on Unsolicited Perspectives with Bruce Anthony. Now, before you go, don't forget to follow, subscribe, like, comment, and share our podcast wherever you're listening or watching it to it. Pass it along to your friends. If you enjoy it, that means the people that you rock will enjoy it also. So share the wealth, share the knowledge, share the noise. And for all those people that say, well, I don't have a YouTube. If you have a Gmail account, you have a YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can actually watch our video podcast and YouTube exclusive content. But the real party is on our Patreon page, After Hours Uncensored and Talking Straight-ish. After Hours Uncensored is another show with my sister. And once again, the key word there is uncensored. Those are exclusively on our Patreon page. Jump onto our website at unsolicitedperspectives.com for all things us. That's where you can get all of our audio, video, our blogs, and even buy our merch. And if you really feel generous and want to help us out, you can donate on our donations page. Donations go strictly to improving our software and hardware so we can keep giving you guys good content that you can clearly listen to and that you can clearly see. So any donation would be appreciative. Most importantly, I want to say thank you for listening and watching and supporting us. And I'll catch you next time. Audi 5000. Peace.